Hello Year 10 and welcome to today's lesson. Before you begin, please make sure you've downloaded the two supporting files, the Zoella Audience Appeal file and the Zoella Users and Grats document. Firstly, a knowledge retrieval task. 3 questions about how narrative works in Zoella's videos. First question is, what is the typical narrative structure of a Zoella video? Second question, how does Zoella talk to her viewers and why does she do so? And the third question, how does Zoella tend to use Todorov's narrative structure? Spend about 5 minutes answering those questions in full sentences in your own words, thinking about the work we did last time. Then, when you've done that, move on to the next slide. So the typical narrative structure of a Zoella video, she starts with a loud and cheerful hello and then explains the focus of the video, which is the enigma which she will solve. In terms of Todorov, we get effectively the equilibrium, the cheery hello, Zoella in her normal world, and the disequilibrium which she introduces. In terms of binary opposites, effectively, we have the state that Zoella is in at the start of the video compared to the state that she wants to be in terms of prop. Effectively, we have Zoella in many different roles. We have her as the hero, setting out on the quest. She is her own dispatcher and indeed her own princess's father. In some respects, you could also argue that she, or the viewer, if you like, are the magical helper, or indeed the the donor. Each video, of course, has a key focus, the quest, in other words. And Zoella basically tells the story. Remember, she constructs that narrative. She is in control of the process. The narrative always ends with Zoella reminding viewers on how they can interact with her. It says goodbye in a cheerful way. That is the structure of a Zoella video. Have a look at your answer. Anything that you didn't get, add that in. The next question, how does Zoella talk to viewers and why does she do it in that way? She talks directly to the viewers in an intimate way, as if they are friends, addressing them directly, outlining what the video is about, telling the story as she goes. She draws the viewer in. The way that the shots are framed helps with that. The use of close-ups and medium close-ups make the conversation, if you like, quite intimate between Zoella and her audience. It is effectively as if she is talking to you, drawing you into her world. How does Zoella tend to use Todorov's narrative structure? And basically, each video she tells is a clear story, starting with an equilibrium, effectively Zoella in her normal world, a disequilibrium which she introduces. For example, I have no makeup on, I need to put makeup on, recognition of the problem, I need to go through this process which is quite complicated, attempt to repair, which we watch, and effectively those stages 3 and 4 are the heart of the video. New equilibrium, here is me at the end with my makeup on. That sort of transformation. And that is the typical Zoella Todorov narrative. Check your answers, correct the ones that you didn't quite get right, and then move on to the next slide. Now we're going to talk about Zoella's audience, and at the time of recording, there was some breaking news over the weekend, which you may or may not have seen. Now, I'm recording this on the 31st of January. You will be watching this on the, I think on the 8th of February, so you may or may not already know this. But I shall put that in there as a hook. The breaking news coming up slightly later to do with Zoella's audience. But please do bear in mind, the information here is still relevant to our study. Effectively, what we need to regard Zoella as is a case study now, pretty much, of a somewhat historical YouTuber. And I will leave it at that for the moment, just to kind of hook you in. So we're thinking about the demographics and psychographics of the classic Zoella target audience. And Zoella's target audience at the time that this was written, and the target audience that you should refer to, are the teen, preteen audience that Zoella originally appealed to. So the audience demographic of Zoella's target audience was teens, young teen girls, preteen girls, across the demographic spectrum. She had a very, very broad geographic appeal. She had generally, I would say, to girls, the broader tranche of girls who wanted to be able to do affordable makeup and who engaged in Zoella's quirky lifestyle. But she had a very broad appeal. So demographically, we're talking about preteen and early teen girls. Psychographics were again quite broad. Girls who wanted to engage with the sort of fun, superficial world that Zoella was a part of, but also who liked the idea of engaging with someone who had that kind of big sisterly attitude. So the psychographics of Zoella's audience were a group of young girls, teen girls, preteen girls, who were not particularly bothered about fame and celebrity, but liked to engage with the fun, enjoyable world that Zoella inhabited. And considering the number of followers she has, there were a lot of them, millions. And why does Zoella appeal to that audience? Because she's nice, I think, is the heart of it. Because, as we've discussed, when Zoella first started, and again, that's kind of where we're coming from here, the classic Zoella was the girl in her bedroom, and anybody could do that. So it was an attainable level of fame. And people, you could emulate Zoella. You could turn your own camera on in your bedroom and be like Zoella realistically, and try and do what she did. And she's very good at what she does. She's very bubbly, she's very engaging. And so for the demographic of teen girls, the psychographic of teen girls who liked to experiment with makeup, who wanted to be affordable with their makeup, who didn't want to be sworn at, I suppose, who didn't want to look at content which was too risque, Zoella offered an appeal. Evidence of audiences targeting her online and social participatory products. Well, the most obvious answer is comments in YouTube videos and latterly Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also the opportunity to meet her and to be involved in meet and greets, but primarily for Zoella, the opportunity to interact was YouTube comments and possibly appearing in a video with her, depending upon what she shot. We're going to think a little bit about uses and gratifications later. And I'm going to ask you to do a uses and gratifications task. The influence on her target audience. Well, obviously, the influence of teaching them techniques, teaching them about lifestyle. I mean, she obviously does a lot of stuff to do with mental health, and again, you've got to credit her for that. And she has been very socially aware in that respect. Obviously, also influenced in the same way of Kim Kardashian of wanting them to go and buy stuff. How might Zoella's audience influence Zoella's output? An interesting question with an interesting answer that we will consider in a moment. However, again, we're talking about classic Zoella here. We're talking about Zoella occasionally in a video saying, "You've asked me to do this. You've wanted me to show you this." So sometimes Zoella will produce a video or would produce a video which was in direct response to an audience request for her to do something. And that demonstrates that cyclical model of communication that we discussed, that interactive approach. We also need to consider how Zoella might generate oppositional readings, and again, we're coming to that in a moment. But in general, Zoella has never been universally popular. And there are questions, there have always been questions about Zoella's influence, the effect that Zoella has, whether what she does is of value. And you can find articles stretching all the way back to the mid-teens, challenging whether or not Zoella is a healthy influence. And there are obviously a number of incidents that Zoella has been involved in where she has been pulled up, either by regulators or by the press. So what I'd like you to do is, there is a more detailed document. This will take you about 10 minutes to read, Zoella Audience Appeal PDF, and then make sure that you have answers to the questions below. Describe Zoella's audience, what opportunities exist for audience participation, explain how we know. So that should take you about 10 minutes, I think. Right, so here it is. This story broke on the 30th of January, the day before I recorded this. And basically, Zoella has been dropped from the AQA specification, which is the specification we do. Now, please don't rip up your notes, because firstly, you will still be able to write about her in your exam. And so considering that the work that we've already done, none of that is wasted. And secondly, when I planned the course, a lot of the social media convention stuff and the audience appeal of social media was built into the Zoella bit. So if we don't do it, then you will miss out on a chunk of important information. So I've decided that we're going to finish off Zoella. This is the last week of Zoella. And please do be aware that none of this work is wasted, and that it will contribute to any question that you might have about Kim Kardashian's social media, and also any broader question which asks about audience participation in the media. Now, the reason I'm mentioning it here is because it's an important point about audiences, and particularly who Zoe Sugg and Zoella, who her target audience is now. So the story goes that, and you may have spotted this actually, on Zoella's website, she basically had an article where she included a feature about sex toys. And this upset some parents whose kids were studying for the GCSE. They felt it was inappropriate for kids to be looking at articles about sex toys. In response, AQA decided that they were going to drop zoella immediately. And this became a story. This was featured not only in The Sun, it was in The Times, it was in The Mail, it was in Lad Bible, amusingly with photographs from the article itself that Zoella published. And so Zoella was dropped. And I want you to draw your attention to this quote. As you know, there won't be exams this summer, which is your year group, and we won't penalise any students who make references to her in their exam responses in 2022. This will not affect your exam in any negative way. And in fact, there is actually a benefit here. And I want to draw your attention to these comments at the bottom, because if you do get a question about audiences and social media, here's a really useful one in terms of how audiences are changed. The common perception of Zoella is that she is aimed at kids. But as we have considered, and as we will consider, Zoella has changed in the last couple of years. Her branding has changed to reflect the change in her audience. And so a spokesman for Zoella told The Sun, and indeed this is a general press release that went out, as a woman in her 30s who has been creating content online for over 10 years, Zoe has naturally matured and evolved in that time, as have her audience. The article appeared on zoella.co.uk, the lifestyle website that was originally founded by Zoe and is now curated by her and her team, covering topics from mental health, fertility, sex, recipes, books, beauty and fashion. The website is primarily targeted at their largest demographic of 25 to 34-year-old women. And that is the really important part, that Zoella's demographic is shifting. She obviously still makes these videos and things which are aimed at a younger audience. The website is now primarily aimed at that audience who will have grown up with Zoella. And that is really useful information, as is that point about the website itself being curated. My guess is that it wasn't Zoella herself who wrote that article, and I would imagine there's probably a bit of a heated discussion going on at Zoella Towers to decide on the impact that that may or may not have had. Anyway, do not worry about the fact that Zoella has been dropped. It will not affect your exam in any meaningful way, and in fact, it has given you quite an interesting thing to talk about with regard to Zoe's audience. Now, jumping back, so what we're doing here now is we're talking about Zoella as in the pre-sex toys Zoella, the Zoella who appealed primarily to teen girls. Zoella's huge audience, and she did have a pretty huge audience, meant that she is recognizable, influential. Her online presence pre being dropped by AQA depended on her engaging, bubbly, positive personality and this wholesome image aimed at this pre-teen, early teen audience. And she is obviously in full control of what she shoots, as is Kim Kardashian, pretty much with her social media output. And it is unlikely that Zoella will shoot and edit in material which makes her look bad, unless that is part of the narrative she wants to create. So she will obviously self-represent in a reasonably positive way. But the important thing as well, and one of the reasons I do quite like her, is that she is willing to film herself without makeup, looking very ordinary, and she looks completely different without makeup, I think. And, which I think is very reassuring for her target audience. She's also willing to talk about things like her anxiety and her mental health, which I think is very important as well, because I think a lot of young people do struggle in that way. It is fair to say that this is unusual, that most celebrities are very, very careful in terms of their image, and very few celebrities will allow themselves to be seen without makeup. So it is a part of her appeal, and it is part of that girl next door, ordinary person persona, which is very much, or was very much, part of the Zoella brand. However, she is obviously now rich and famous. She is obviously a multimillionaire who runs a media business. She is obviously a well-established celebrity who's had a longevity of far more than many similar YouTube celebrities, and indeed actually many mainstream celebrities as well, since she's effectively been in the public eye for over 10 years now. The impact of that recent sex toy story, there have been other stories about Zoella's influence. Have they affected her representation? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, obviously, representation is very subjective, and it may be that for some people, Zoella is never going to have a positive representation. It may be for some people, it's possible to look at her in a kind of nostalgic way. I don't know. I don't know. I think up to a certain point, I would like to think that Zoella was authentic and tries to remain authentic, but I can't help but see her now as the avatar for a company rather than an individual. How do we measure success with regard to Zoella? How do we know Zoella is successful? We know because we can see data, we can see the number of hits on a particular story, the number of likes, the number of retweets, subscribers, followers, views. There are metrics, there is data that we can see. So we know that she has so many subscribers, we know that she has so many followers. It is difficult to make assumptions about the audience demographics, although we obviously do have that quote that we've given about the target audience for the website. There are that core original audience that she did appeal to of the pre-teens and teens. However, it's fair to say, and I think the website would seem to agree with that, that certainly with Zoella's website, certainly as she is now, she does have an appeal to that older, that sort of pre-middle-aged female audience, and there is the potential that Zoella will appeal to a niche audience of men as well. Up until a point, up until this week, she was relatively uncontroversial, but you know, it it was very gentle entertainment. I mean, you can watch a Zoella video and be entertained by it. I wouldn't choose to watch one, but certainly when I'm teaching this course, I much preferred Zoella to Kim Kardashian. So I'm a little bit sad that she's been dropped because there was a sort of gentle humour about it, whereas with Kim Kardashian, I just found that world too nauseatingly celebratory of wealth to actually enjoy in any meaningful way. I mean, I don't mind spending a little bit of time in Zoella's world, but I certainly prefer it to Kim Kardashian's world. The idea of being personally addressed, I mean, you never feel that Kim Kardashian is talking to you because you kind of know that if she met you in the street, she wouldn't even make eye contact with you. With Zoella, you do kind of feel like she is talking to you. She does have that kind of sense of investment. And so I do think that that's one of the reasons why she is quite popular. And I mean, I don't find what she does offensive or upsetting. I find it quite well-meaning and maybe sometimes a little bit lacking in thought. But you know, one of the techniques she does is that she calls her friends and family by their first name, and this creates a very kind of accessible world where famous people are your friends and this makes it quite easy to communicate. And that we have a world of people who we know, who we can talk to, who we can kind of engage with. And they're all linked across the social media, which basically makes for a fairly integrated world. What we need to do now is we need to think about uses and gratifications theory. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about zoella's output. Now, when I say complete the table, I don't mean just look at my examples and then leave it blank. I mean, please fill in your own examples as well. Now, you'll notice that I've put in some quite detailed examples of zoella's output. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to re-watch one of the zoella videos that we've already looked at and see if you can find actual concrete physical examples, actual moments from the videos that you can refer to. Now, you might remember those videos when we've looked at one about where she put her makeup on, we've looked at that Christmas one, we've looked at the Tinder one, we've looked at the one where they do the ASOS shop. Pick one of those, go back to it, re-watch it, find examples, fill in that second column. It'll take you about 10 minutes or so, I think. Right, to conclude, a mini essay, a 6-mark question that should take you 5 or 6 minutes. The question is, YouTube vloggers are only popular with a narrow demographic. How far is this true of zoella? And this is a how far question. It is asking your opinion. You can refer to zoella's website, her YouTube channel, her Instagram or Twitter feeds, any zoella output. You've got a maximum of 10 minutes to answer the question. You probably won't have 10 minutes left, but use all the time you've got left to answer the question. Try and write a paragraph, 6-mark question. When you've finished, photograph your work, including your completed responses to the table. Please make sure you've uploaded your work. Please make sure you have actually attached your work. Please make sure you've clicked the turn in button, and then that is it.